Welcome to the Strength for Life podcast, where smart strength training meets real life. We're Dr. Matt and Nicole Klingberg, founders of Village Fitness and Physical Therapy. Here, you'll learn what really works in the gym, at home, and for life.
Today, we're going to talk about recovery. Because here's the truth. You don't get stronger or fitter when you train, but rather in between sessions when you recover. We're going to dig into how to train to optimize recovery and what to do between your workouts to recover better. According to the CDC, 1 in 4 adults hits both the strength training and cardio recommendations each week. So what they recommend is 150 minutes of cardio per week and 2 strength training sessions per week. Now, of the 1 in 4 who do meet that criteria, many of them are not getting the full benefits of their exercise and their training because of their inability to recover fully from their training.
And to understand a bit more about recovery, we need to set the stage with a little bit of background on the stress recovery adaptation cycle. And to do that, we need to go back 90 years to this guy named Hans Selye, who was a young medical student in Canada. And he did these crazy experiments on rats where he would subject them to all kinds of different forms of torture. He would make them exercise. He'd subject them to extreme cold. I'd put toxins in them. I mean, these poor rats that were signing up for these studies, I don't know why they would do it. You know, if I was one of these rats, I would not have signed up for this study.
I don't think they had a choice.
Okay, that's a good point. That's a good point.
That's why it's harder to get people to do any type of research studies, because it turns out people don't want to be tortured.
That's true. So what he found was really, really interesting. No matter the stress, whether it was a toxin or exercise or cold exposure, these rats followed a similar pattern after exposure to the stress. Their adrenal glands enlarged, their immune systems weakened, some even developed stomach ulcers. They all got weaker, and then some of them actually started to come back and respond to the stress by becoming stronger. Others continued to get weaker to the point where they would literally die from the stress. And he was so fascinated by this that he coined the term general adaptation syndrome, or GAS. And he divided this syndrome into 3 different phases. Phase 1, the alarm phase. Phase 2, the resistance phase. And then phase 3, the exhaustion phase. So the alarm phase is actually when our body responds to the stress, whether emotional or physical, triggering this fight or flight response with increased heart rate, adrenaline, heightened alertness, and leaving our body temporarily weaker in the process as it scrambles to restore balance. And then the resistance phase, where if the stress persists or sufficiently drops homeostasis, which we're going to talk about, the body enters this phase where it adapts by altering hormones, energy productions, and structural proteins to better withstand future stressors. This is really how our bodies are set up. We encounter stressors like exercise, which we're going to talk a lot about today. It breaks us down and makes us weaker. And then we hopefully build back a little bit stronger before we do our next workout. That's the basic premise behind how exercise works in the human body. Now, he also said phase 3 is the exhaustion phase, where the stress becomes so chronic and recovery doesn't happen. The body can't adapt from the stress, so it just continually gets weaker and weaker and eventually reaches a breaking point where you either get injured, you get burned out, or in the case of these rats, they die. And when it comes to training of any type, specifically barbell training, we use slightly different terms when we talk about the general adaptation syndrome. The first is the stress, aka the workout. So when you're doing a workout, it creates a stress. So let's say you go in the gym and you're doing your set of squats. You do your warm-ups because you're smart and you're doing squats. And then you do your actual 3 sets of 5 reps. As you're going through that workout, assuming that the weight is heavy enough, you should actually have a harder time finishing the 3rd set than you did the 1st set. And that's because your performance is dropping down. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the first part of this graph here next to me. And because it's dropping down, that means your 3rd set will become harder than the first. Your 2nd set will be harder than the first, et cetera, et cetera. And this is because heavy lifting not only taxes your muscles, but also your nervous system, your metabolism, your connective tissue, and your cardiovascular system. And there's more to that. There's a neuromuscular effect. There's a metabolic effect. There's a cardiovascular effect. And it creates this kind of survival signal within our body. Now, lifting heavy is a full body stress, and your body sometimes interprets it as a reason to set off the fight or flight response within you. And that can be a good thing as long as you can recover from it.
Yeah, I've seen that when I do, especially my overhead press, which is by far my hardest barbell lift. My first set, I'm like, okay, I can do this. And I do my 5 reps and, the bar slows down by my 5th rep. But I get into my 3rd set and I like hit that sticking point. I'm like shaking. I can barely get the bar up. And often, if I'm in one of our small group sessions, the coach likes to laugh at me because how hard it
very
looks.
Nice.
I know. It is probably pretty funny to look at. But that first set, it's like, okay, I can do this. And by that 3rd set, like I either like barely finish it or I don't complete all my reps. So next, phase 2 is recovery. So after that initial phase 1, the stress, we get into our recovery. And this is really the part that we're going to, focus on today. We want you to understand the whole, cycle, but we also want you to understand what happens in the recovery phase. So we have that decrease in our performance. And the goal is to get back to homeostasis. So not to just get back to, baseline strength, but we actually want to use that recovery so that we can actually go above our baseline strength. But in that recovery time, our performance, like Matt said, is decreased, and then it starts to make its way back up, and we'll eventually return to baseline. So for a younger individual, that recovery usually is about 24 to 48 hours, maybe a little bit longer if you did a really intense workout. Whereas older adults, it can take up to 7 to 10 days to fully recover from a hard training session. So
yeah, I had a funny story. I had this guy I worked out with in high school named Eddie. Eddie, if you're listening, thank you. I miss you. Eddie would bench press every single day, 7 days a week. And he was like 16 years old at the time, and he got really strong. I mean, 16-year-old kid, he was benching like 300 pounds and got huge pec muscles. And he didn't get injured, probably because he was 16. And when you're 16, you're made of rubber and magic. And he was swimming in recovery hormones. And so he was able to recover within 24 hours from these workouts because he was actually getting stronger. Now, the research shows that your fitness may go up the next day after you do a hard workout, but you may still be experiencing the impacts of that previous day's workout. So for Eddie, he was just compounding and building upon his previous day's workout and just fighting through the fatigue. So he was able to do that. Now, I've noticed that the older I've gotten, I'm 36 now, and
old man.
Yeah, old man, just turned 36. I've noticed that I need longer to recover than I did when I was 26 or 16. I did a workout program where I would do squats 3 days a week when I was probably like 23 years old before we moved down to Southern California, when I was a personal trainer. And I really didn't have any issues recovering from those 3 fairly heavy squat workouts each and every week. And then I repeated that program, about a year ago, and I found that it was a challenge to recover. I really had to be intentional about my recovery, especially as the weight started to get heavier, to the point where it was like, man, I actually had to alter the program slightly and not squat 3 days a week towards the end of the 12 weeks or so that I was doing it because I just couldn't recover fully from it.
That being said, I think for, if you're listening and you haven't started strength training or you're new to strength training, you shouldn't be lifting heavy enough to need that much recovery. Like you shouldn't need 7 to 10 days. Like the recovery that Matt's talking about now is from someone who has been doing this for a long time and is really pushing kind of the upper limits. But those really the first 10 to 12 weeks of training, really is a lot of neurological adaptations. And that's where a lot of our strength gains come from, not necessarily from increased muscle mass. That happens over time. But in order to get more neural adaptation, you really just need to do the movement more, and not at a super heavy load. So instead of, training, on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being you hit failure, 0 being it's really easy, you should probably be in the 4 to 6 range when you're first starting lifting and really just just reinforcing those movement patterns and making sure that your body knows how to recruit all the muscle fibers fully, and that you learn your form and technique so that you don't get injured. If you go too heavy too soon, which we do see happen in our program, I think it tends to happen more with men. I wonder why.
Yeah, it does.
They often come in and they will say things like, I used to squat 400 pounds in high school.
With Eddie.
Or
They did it with Eddie.
They did it with Eddie.
Eddie was bench pressing, but they were squatting.
Yeah, they were squatting. They bench pressed, 300 pounds in high school. And the expectation is that they are going to just jump back into a very similar weight because that's like their anchor point.
Yeah.
Well, the problem
did you
is
say
that
older adults can take up to 10 days to fully recover?
I did, yeah.
Training? Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah. So the problem is that, they start off too heavy and then they end up getting injured, and then they have to take a break from strength training. And so I would really, even if you did strength train a long time ago, if you've taken an extended break, like go lighter earlier on and slowly progress each week. Obviously you don't want to be too light for too long, but I think that a lot of people go too heavy too quickly.
Interesting thing to note, as you age, it takes longer to recover. Also, as you age, muscle protein synthesis, which is the process by which we build muscle, doesn't stay elevated for as long. So an older person needs actually a higher training stimulus, a more frequent training stimulus, and more protein intake to get the same amount of muscle protein synthesis on a weekly basis as a younger person, yet their bodies don't recover as quickly as a younger person, which is why the older you get, the more dialed in your training, nutrition, and recovery have to be if you're going to get stronger and avoid injury. And we're going to talk about how to optimize today. So if that's you, if you're like, hey, I'm over the age of 40, but I really want to be fit, I want to be strong, I want to be lean, I want to be healthy, this is a great podcast for you to listen to, because we're going to talk about the way to get there.
Yeah, in our group training program, we do all of our big lifts once a week, so that you get that 7 to 10 days between doing heavy squats from week 1 to week 2 to week 3. That being said, it's not that we don't do the squat movement, in between those 7 days from when they do squats once to the next week. They're just not doing heavy squats. So we'll vary it by doing things like tempo squats, goblet squats, body weight squats. And again, that's just to reinforce that movement pattern, and you can still see some strength gains, but we're just not going really heavy. So they're not going as maximal on that load.
Cool. Then phase 3 is what's called supercompensation or adaptation. I really like the word supercompensation.
Me too.
It's a nice
Sounds
word.
pretty cool.
So if the training stress is sufficient, it triggers recovery such that your performance will actually exceed what it was before your first workout. And it goes above the old baseline. So for example, if you could squat 100 pounds at max before that first workout, if you're doing it right, you should be able to squat 105 pounds after the first workout once you've fully recovered. And that, when you peak on your performance, is when you want to do that second workout. Now, the key idea is you don't get stronger from the actual workout itself, but the recovery that happens in between. Hopefully this is it makes sense, but I want to say it again because a lot of people just don't get this. You don't get stronger from the actual workout. You get stronger in between due to the recovery that's initiated by the workout. So the process is like this. You go through a stress, you recover, you supercompensate, you have higher strength, higher neuromuscular efficiency, and then hopefully you train again. You do another workout and you bump it up a little higher over time. That's the premise behind progressive overload. And that's why in our programs, we have clients start at a weight that's very manageable for them and then slowly and steadily add weight over time as they begin to make progress, because the same stress applied the second workout is not going to have the same amplitude of effect as the first one did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our bodies, we want to be at homeostasis, and so we want to be, our bodies are not inclined to face, stress. It's like everyone wants the easy road. That's why we want, to use our phone. We want to sit on the couch. Our body doesn't like stress, but we know that stress is good for our bodies.
Right.
And so over time, essentially your body's homeostasis and ability, like your strength and your baseline, increases, because it's like, well, I have to be able to handle that stress if I face that stress again. Whereas if you're just sitting on the couch eating donuts and watching Netflix, your body's just it's not gonna adapt. And that homeostasis and your strength, it won't even say level, it'll decrease over time. Just with aging and what we see with sarcopenia, and bone density will decrease, and all sorts of negative things will happen. And so you want that baseline strength to be increasing rather than decreasing. But what happens when you train again too soon?
Well, you would just get progressively lower and lower performance. Like if I tried to bench press every day, like Eddie, I would probably over time actually get weaker, and I might even get injured. And I'd probably hate bench pressing a whole lot. And if I waited too long, like if I bench press and then waited 3 weeks and then bench pressed again, my guess is I would have already returned back to my baseline. And if you're at a really high level of training, like if you've been strength training 3 days a week and all of a sudden you go to 1 day a week, let's say, you may actually notice your strength goes below baseline. You may start to slowly lose those adaptations of strength that you've built up by training 3 times a week.
And then if you train too hard, so think like, if you're doing, say, like chronic cardio, lifting every day, bench pressing every day, doing things like CrossFit where, it's high volume, heavy weights, that'll often lead to things like chronic fatigue, irritability.
If you can't recover from it. That's
an
important caveat.
Yes, if you can't recover from it.
Because there are people that train for marathons that recover like a gangster and are able to, get faster and faster and fitter.
We've got a few of those on our staff.
Yes. In fact, HRV, or heart rate variability, is one of the best indicators of recovery. We found out that Jamila behind the camera has a superhuman HRV. She's covering her face. She's so embarrassed. No, she's not. She says thumbs up.
She also just ran 20 miles and trained for her marathon.
Her HRV is over 100.
I know. That's just insane.
Mine is like 50 on a great day.
Mine's in the 30s on a great day.
Yeah. We're worried about you.
The other thing that can happen too is that you train too little. And I find this more with women.
Older adults in general.
Just older adults, they think that they need the aqua aerobics. My favorite is seeing people walk around with the 1 pound dumbbells doing their, bicep curls and tricep extensions. And that's not bad. It's just not going to get you, it's not going to, do anything to change your strength over time because, the stimulus is staying the same. And you're not going to, your baseline strength won't improve if you're just kind of doing that. Not to say that walking isn't good, but specifically for strength and that super compensation, that won't happen if you don't have enough of a stimulus or stress on your body.
Yeah. One of the questions I get asked pretty often is, should I wait until I'm no longer sore to exercise again? Or said differently, is me not getting sore from my workout an indicator that I didn't get a good workout? And if it were up to me, I would just remove muscle soreness from the conversation when it comes to your training frequency. I don't think it's a good indicator of either of those things. I don't think it's a good indicator of whether you had a good workout or not. I don't think it's a good indicator of when you should train again or not. And I'll tell you a little story. So I was doing some squats as I do, and I was doing 3 days a week, like I was telling you about earlier, and I had worked up to the point where I was doing 295 pounds for 3 sets of 5 on my squats, and I was doing that like 3 days a week, heavy squats 3 days a week. Well, I hit my goal. I wanted to squat 315 for a set of 5. I hit my goal, and I took like a month off of squats just to give my body a break. When I came back, my first workout back, I did 185 pounds, over 100 pounds less than I had done previously. And I was so crippled sore for like 5 days after that workout. And obviously, just 4 weeks prior, I had done over 100 pounds more, zero soreness whatsoever. I felt fine. So it's not the magnitude of the workout that leads to the muscle soreness, nor is it an indicator of a good workout. It's just novelty. That's really what muscle soreness is. It's your brain responding to a novel stimulus of exercise and saying, we're going to set off the inflammatory process in the muscles because this feels threatening and new, and we want to get the repair process going. Now, the more you do squats, if you do squats, every week, after a few weeks, you're not going to be sore anymore, even if you're slowly bumping up the weight. And that's the ideal workout. And you're not going to get sore. So it's not fair to say, in fact, it's unwise to say, hey, if I'm not getting sore anymore, does that mean I'm not getting a good workout?
And the reason why people, sometimes relate, I think, soreness with like, a good workout
because of Tony Horton.
is because they're always changing the training stimulus. Like it's novel every time because they're doing a different workout every time.
Yes.
So their body's not able to make those adaptations, like we're talking about with progressive overload and strength training. And so it actually puts them at a disadvantage because I think they're just going to kind of stay the same as far as their strength because the stimulus changes every time. And so they're always really sore. They feel like they got a good workout when in reality, like their strength is the same. And, not to say that there's not any other adaptations that happen, like maybe their blood volume increases, they have more mitochondria. So it's not to say that it's bad. It's just not as effective as progressive overload.
Yeah. So back in 2020 or 2019, maybe, we got on this Tony Horton P90X kick where we were doing P90X in my living room. Actually, Dr. Eric on our team, he got us into Tony Horton and P90X.
Which actually was incredible timing.
It was because COVID hit, and then all of a sudden we had to create our own workout videos, and we'd been watching a bunch of workout videos and exercising to them, so we had some experience. Anywho, not the point. The point is his whole system and what made him popular was what he called muscle confusion. And the premise behind it was that you need to constantly be shocking your muscles with different stimuli so that they never get used to the workout and they're always in a state of constant soreness.
That's true. I was always sore.
Always sore.
Always sore.
And both times I've attempted to go through that program, I've hurt myself. One time my knee, one time my shoulder, and I just couldn't stick with the program. Now, that may be a me issue. I know lots of people that have made it through that program. Most of them were in their 20s. But anyways, so that whole premise of muscle confusion and constantly mixing things up is unwise because when your body actually knows what to expect, it can slowly and steadily build strength, endurance, tissue integrity, building things stronger over time. Whereas when it's random, it's like if you're doing different movement patterns, yeah, you might get better at that movement pattern for a little bit. Like if you're doing curtsy lunge, let's say, where you're stepping back and behind you, you might be ready to do that again, but a little bit more 3 days from now, even 7 days from now. But let's say you don't repeat that again for a month, that movement. You're no longer going to be stronger at that movement. You're just going to get sore again.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So anyways, I'll get off my soapbox of muscle soreness.
And often I tell people too, like when they're like, I'm so sore, when they work out or do low level movement, which we're going to talk about later as like a form of recovery, they feel significantly better, not nearly as sore after they move. Like the worst thing you can do, part of the reason I think, and have witnessed myself and with clients, the reason that they get sore is they do really heavy strength training and then they go and sit all day. They don't move. And so that just really increases their soreness because everything kind of gets stiff. It's not moving. And so that really increases the soreness, not so much like the workout itself.
Another important note on muscle soreness. Now, there was a study done in 2003 by Chung et al., and they showed that muscle soreness doesn't even correlate with actual muscle damage or your readiness to train again. So let that sink in. It doesn't even correlate with actual muscle damage. You say, well, how could that be? How could someone have pain without tissue damage? And that's because the brain is in charge of controlling pain within our bodies and inflammation within our bodies. And like I said earlier, what sets off that inflammatory process is more the brain saying, hey, something new and threatening happened as opposed to actual tissue damage. So remember that. The next time you get really sore and you think, I can't train again, or maybe even like, oh my gosh, did I hurt myself? Know that it's probably more likely you did something new or a little too much too soon. Now, you can avoid a lot of muscle soreness just by starting at a level that's below what you're capable of, like well below. So we start people with empty barbells for overhead press. We do have a training bar that's 15 pounds. That's what we do our overhead presses with. Often our back squats, we start body weight because I find that squats tend to make people pretty sore. And deadlifts, we start with usually 35 pounds. So the training bar plus 10s on each side. I find deadlifts don't make people quite as sore.
It's the squats.
As a squat. Yeah, squats just destroy people. They get you. Mine, for me, it's my adductors. My inner thighs get really sore with squats, especially if I squat and then ride my bike hard the next day. And then I'm really sore and tight. So it's a personal problem again. I got a lot of those. Anyway, so this concept of stress, recovery, adaptation, it's really important to understand. And I think we live in a world today that's set up for our comfort and convenience. And we've got homes where we can temperature control to the hour and to the degree exactly what we want our home to feel like. We've got temperature control cars, Netflix. My kids love this. It'll play the next episode of whatever.
Before we can pause it or turn it off.
Before we can even pause it. Netflix. I don't like it. I like it for me, but not for them. And there's a lot of this stuff that's like, it's great. It's nice that we have all these conveniences in life today. But if we're not careful, it can tend to make us weaker and actually less healthy over time. It can make us
soft.
Yeah, soft is the word.
Yep.
And by soft, I mean not resilient. Human beings we are really meant to encounter stress that we can recover from. We want to be like the rats in those studies that encountered the stress and became stronger. And I think if you think about stress, recovery, adaptation, and apply it to just about any stress out there, you're going to be a healthier version of yourself. If you think about it in terms of sunlight, if you think about it in terms of cold and heat exposure, obviously cold and heat can kill you. You can die from hyperthermia or hypothermia. But if we're never exposed to different temperatures, we become weak. Our immune systems actually get weaker. Exercise. You can literally kill yourself from too much exercise or not enough exercise. Yet the right amount of exercise makes us really resilient and strong, and it's one of the most powerful tools you can implement in your life for improving your longevity. And again, you could apply this to food. Too much food will cause you to become obese and could literally kill you. Not enough food, you can become malnourished and die. The right amount of food can help you to be really healthy and to thrive. So any stress can be applied through the same sort of framework and lens.
Yeah. So we have always, we're always talking, especially on our hikes. That tends to be when we have our best thoughts. And
we're on this podcast.
Yeah, on this podcast too. And we were on a hike, and we're always thinking about like, how do we optimize?
This is back in 2020.
Yes, back in 2020 when the world was shut down, and we couldn't do anything except hike or be outside, and so or inside, which most people were. And so we were on a hike, and we were like, man, like how do we get clients like past to break through plateaus, or how do we get them to, back off? Because it's really hard to do that in a group setting. And it's really hard to tell, one person, like, you need to back off now or deload, and then tell the other person to push it. And so there's always that like social kind of pressure of like, well, they're doing more, so I should probably do more. And so we're like, how do we program this in? A lot of strength training programs, they like periodize it so that, you get, you go through a 16-week or 12-week cycle, and there's always rest built in. And so we're like, we don't have that like programmed into Village. And so like, how do we do that? So we started like brainstorming, and you were reading a book that was talking about this restaurant called The Lost Kitchen. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I was reading a book called Fix This Next by Mike Michalowicz. Mike, shout out to you if you're listening. Love you, man. Anyways, so Mike wrote about this restaurant called The Lost Kitchen in Freedom, Maine. And this restaurant is in a tiny town of like 700 people. And they're only open 6 months out of the year. In order to get a reservation at this restaurant, it's in such high demand that you have to send a postcard to the restaurant explaining why you should get a reservation there. And then they go through the postcards, and they tell you what time you can come and what date you can come to their restaurant. It's completely backwards from most restaurants who have, their hostess out front of the restaurant begging people to come in. And the reason they've attracted so many, so much attention and so much demand for their restaurant is because they have really good food, really good service. And they've also created a limit on how many people they can serve in a year by being closed for 6 months.
And they use that time to like recipe test and to make sure that they're sourcing things. Like it's really cool. The owner like goes and she meets with all of the vendors, and really a lot of them are just the farmers or the fishermen, or she literally goes to each person to talk about what they're going to have in this next season and how she can incorporate that into her menu. So she's like planning her menu and spending all of that time like building an incredible experience, getting the best, sources of food and all of the ingredients that she'll need. And if she didn't take that time to pause and to rest, like her product and her food wouldn't be at the demand that it's at.
Yeah, and we had been talking a lot about the idea of rest and asking ourselves this question of, as a business, could we better serve our clients by giving them less in terms of weeks out of the year? Could we take a week away, and would we be able to better serve them as a business? And then for our clients, if they take a week off from working out, would they actually net throughout the course of the year, would they be better off if they took a week off during the year? And I've seen this pattern in a lot of folks these days. They either don't do enough, like we were talking about earlier, or they're constantly doing too much. They're constantly overstressed and overtaxed. And what we need is these seasons where we're pushing ourselves, but then we need to also have seasons where we take a step back and we actually get to recover from that push. And so we had this idea. We're like, what if we close for a week? We'll call it rest week. And what if we just gave our clients a week off, give our staff the week off? And by the end of that hike, we had come up with this idea or stumbled upon really the math around the annual calendar. So it's 52 weeks in a year. If we divide that by 4, it's 13. So you're like, well, what if we had 12 weeks of training followed by a week off and then repeated that cycle 4 times throughout the year? And that's literally what we've done the last 5 years. The last 5 years, we've been taking a rest week. It started in December of 2020. We took a week off. We thought that our clients were just going to totally revolt. And turns out 99% of them love it. They're like, great, I don't have to come to the gym for a week. This is awesome.
And it's been amazing to see, like, I have, talked to clients who are like, I schedule like doing things like I get a massage, or I, plan my vacations, or I really try to go outside that week and they go do cool hikes, or they, go scuba diving. And it's like we had a client who last rest week, she was doing water skiing. And so it's like they really use that time to that they probably wouldn't otherwise have because they're in the gym and everyday life, to kind of pause from that and do things that are restorative and restful. And it just gives their bodies a break. It leads to less injury. And I think they all come back like excited after having the week off, because it's like, okay, I've had a break, both mentally, physically, and I'm excited for this next quarter. And we've seen people really progress a lot more in their strength than just like when they went straight all year and never took a break.
Yep. So there's a really interesting research study that was done. They kind of put this concept to the test, and you can see the graph of it right here next to me. The empty circles, the white circles, was the control group, and the black circles were the experiment group. And I'll tell you about these two groups in just a second. But essentially what they did, researchers had subjects do 3 sets of 10 of bench press 3 days per week. And the control group was the white. They trained every single week, 3 sets of 10 of bench press. And the experimental group, they trained for 6 weeks, those 3 sets of 10, 3 days a week. And then they took 3 weeks off. No bench press. Sorry, Eddie. And they did it again. They trained for 6 weeks, 3 weeks off. They trained for 6 weeks. And then they compared at the end between the two groups who had more strength, who had more muscle cross-sectional area, who had better ability to contract their muscles. And they found literally no difference between the groups. So one group bench pressed every single week, or they worked out every single week, 3 days a week for 24 weeks straight. The other group took a cumulative 6 weeks off in the 24 weeks. And at the end of the study, they were all the same. So here's a couple things that I think you should take away from a study like this. I don't think you should take 3 weeks off out of every 9 weeks. I think that's a little excessive. These were young trainees that were inexperienced, and they were just doing bench press. So I think that as you age, you're going to lose your strength adaptations much quicker. So you probably can't just take 3 weeks off out of every 9 and expect to continue to make progress. These trainees were also relatively new to strength training. My guess is that the longer they went on in their strength training journey, like if this had been a 2-year study, we would have started to actually see a gap between the two groups, because the 3 weeks of not training would have just produced such rapid de-adaptations as the group got stronger and fitter. But I think there are some things you can take away, and it's that you're not going to lose everything if you have a week vacation, or if you do take a rest week, a week off. In fact, you may be better off and be just as strong, and it gives your more passive tissues like ligaments and tendons and bones and nerves that take longer to recover. It just gives them a little extra time to recover and catch up to the heavy strength training that you're doing.
Yeah. And so in these rest weeks, well, I guess the way that we now have our trainings, we didn't start benchmark week when we started rest week, but a couple of years later, we added in
what that is.
benchmark week. Yeah. And that is at the end of our 12 weeks. So we train really hard for 11 weeks. And then the 12th week, we test 6 of our 12 movement standards. We always test our big 3 in ski erg. And then we rotate one of our other 12 movement standards. So like this quarter, we are doing village lunge as one of them. And people have the opportunity to essentially test their max. They're not doing 1 rep max. It's just a little bit riskier, leads to a little bit more injury, but they're doing 3 reps for deadlift and then 5 reps for everything else. And this really just allows them to kind of see their progress. They just do 1 set instead of 3. And what happens is people often make, pretty big jumps throughout the quarter and sometimes even just like at the very end. Part of it is just the environment, the encouragement, and just kind of that, like when you have that adrenaline, people see a boost in their performance, and also just kind of like the cortisol is increased. But then after that, then they take the week off, and it allows their body a little bit longer to recover. So we often say, like, it is a good week to push. If you've been here, for most of the 12 weeks, this is the week to push because you will have longer to recover next week. And then we back off the weight a little bit when they come back so that they're not, they're slowly building back up and they're not at too high of a training stimulus for too long.
I like it.
And then rest too, I think another thing to highlight is that, rest doesn't mean do nothing. So like during rest weeks, we really encourage our clients to be outside, to walk a lot, to do a lot of light movement and low level activity. And that really just helps them to, again, gives their body a little bit of a break from the heavy strength training. It helps, a lot of people mentally. And for us, we really enjoy, getting outside. So often in rest weeks, we're hiking or we're skiing or, we're doing things outside, like going to the beach for the day. And so, don't take that as like, this is just my week to sit on the couch and watch Netflix. It's really about dialing down the intensity so that it gives your body a chance to adapt. And also we're going to get into nutrition in a moment, but that's a big part of it as well. It's not just like we're just going on vacation and eating chips and donuts and sitting on the couch all week. So that's not what rest week's about.
So when it comes to recovery outside of just not training or how you train, there's a lot of things to consider. Probably the most important being sleep. I remember in college, I was working out in the college gym, the Arc in Davis, and I started chatting with this guy that was working out next to me and found out he was doing this insane squat workout. It was 10 sets of 10, really heavy, all 10 sets. It would take him like 2.5 to 3 hours to complete his whole workout. And I asked him,
ain't nobody got time for that.
No, not anymore. No. I asked him, I was like, man, are you worried about overtraining? And he looked at me right in the face. He said, Matt, there's no such thing as overtraining, only under recovering. I was like, that's interesting. And I think there's some wisdom to that. I think that if you can recover from the workout, the workout can be pretty intense. But, if you're sleeping 10 hours a night, you're on the younger side, you're eating enough, like you could probably recover from a fairly intense workout and still adapt and get stronger. Because workouts are catabolic, meaning they break you down as opposed to build you up, which would be anabolic. Sleep is a very anabolic process, meaning it builds you back up.
Yeah. So you don't, like Matt had said before, you don't just get stronger in the gym, you get stronger when you recover. And the best way to do that is through sleep. So there was a gold standard study that was done with 20-something-year-olds. So again, you have to take that into consideration. And they had them pull an all-nighter, like all, college students. And they measured their muscles' ability to build new protein after eating. So that one night without sleep, it actually cut their muscle protein synthesis by 18%. So it's pretty cool. They had them, do no sleep, and then they actually hooked them up and just took blood draws every hour for about 8 hours after. And then at 2 hours, they did a muscle biopsy, and again at 5 hours, they could actually see like what was happening to their muscles and also in their blood. So all the hormones and everything like that. So one night of sleep cut muscle protein synthesis by 18%, which is huge. And this is just one night, mind you. Cortisol, which is your catabolic, like you said, like the breakdown hormone, it ran 21% higher. Testosterone dipped 24%.
Testosterone is really important for anabolism or building.
Mm-hmm, yep. And so one bad night of sleep can really flip your body from, building muscle to breaking it down and not allowing your body to really build muscle, which is a problem. And so Fortunately, this is bad news for, parents of newborns. What they really should have done, they have them do things in the study, like making sure that they were reading, or they let them have like snacks throughout the night. And I was like, that's so interesting, because, most parents of newborns have been up all night, and that was not
Well,
the
they should
reason
just
that
put a
were up.
newborn in the room.
They should just put a newborn in the room.
But solve the problem.
Yeah, I know, right? If your goal is to adapt from training, especially if you're over 55, sleep is the cheapest. It's also the safest, and it's the most effective recovery tool that you've got. There's a lot of different ways that you can, track your sleep. And we found over the last couple of years of having Oura rings, like that has been one of the biggest things that has helped me to actually know if I'm recovered, because it tells me my sleep, it tells me my recovery, my HRV.
And it's so nice. Oura ring is so nice. I remember Whoop.
Yeah.
When I had the Whoop, it was so mean. Just tell me like, hey, listen, buddy, you're in the red today. You probably shouldn't go outside and play. Just stay inside all day. Take a nap. The Oura ring's like, hey, you might not have a good day, but it's going to be okay.
Like focus on more restorative time, which is actually really good, because I think it's good to be aware of that. Like,
nice to
okay,
have somebody who's nice to me.
Yeah. And so that has been a game changer. Just measuring my sleep has really motivated me to get more sleep and to prioritize it, because I'm like, oh, I need, I think I'm in bed for a certain amount of time, but it shows me I actually slept a lot less. And so prioritizing sleep is literally the best thing you can do. Funny story, in college, my roommate and I would pull like almost all-nighters. We would probably go to bed at like 4 or 5 a.m. We'd like to stay up. We'd watch YouTube videos until the point, like we would watch it on repeat until, we actually memorized the whole YouTube video. So I won't quote any of those memorized YouTube videos. However, what I found was that, of course, it was hard for me to, wake up in the morning, or I woke up feeling sluggish, and I kind of always had that like general fatigue. And when you're in your early 20s, you can kind of get by with that. But now it's like I have a bad night of sleep. I actually went to a women's retreat this last weekend with my church, and I got 5 hours of sleep. And no joke, I was like, I am wrecked. I worked out with my training partner on Sunday, and we both were like, I feel absolutely horrible after just that one night of poor sleep. So you definitely can't bounce back as quickly. And so I think that just goes to show, not that you can never, skip on sleep, but it is really important. And so the older you get, the more you need to prioritize sleep and sleep quality. So,
all right, let's talk nutrition.
Great. Yeah. So the standard American diet, unfortunately, is very skewed on what is optimal for recovery as far as macronutrients. So there's 3 macronutrients. I think most people are familiar with these terms, but we're going to go ahead and break it down. So there's carbohydrates, there's protein, and there's fat. So according to the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, here is what they said is like the average amount of calories percentage-wise in the standard American diet. So it's 45 to 50% carbohydrates, which is a problem because it's mostly refined grains, added sugars, highly processed carbohydrates, which are not the best source of energy or nutrients for your body. Protein is only at 15 to 16% of their total calories, which is about 70 to 90 grams of protein per day. It's often from animal sources, but usually not very good animal sources. So like cheap, meat from the sad cows. And so, protein is on the low side. And then fat is 35 to 36% of calories. And unfortunately, a lot of that fat comes from, highly processed oils and fats that are really not optimal for our body to recover.
So as far as nutrition and recovery, probably the most important macronutrient to consider is protein, then fat, and then carbohydrates. We're going to go in that order. Protein is essential for the rebuilding and repair process. So strength training, when you lift weights, it breaks down your muscles and causes tiny tears in the muscle fibers. Protein supplies the amino acids or the building blocks that you actually need to repair and rebuild those fibers stronger. This repair process is what actually makes muscles come back stronger, more resilient, larger, etc. And we use this process called muscle protein synthesis, which we've touched on a few times today, by which we actually produce higher levels of protein within our circulation to allow for that repair to happen. And the key trigger amino acid is an amino acid called leucine. It's one of the many amino acids, and it's found in very high amounts in whey protein, which is like milk, In various dairy products, like all dairy products have very high levels of leucine. Meat, especially beef, and eggs. So if you want to optimize your leucine levels, you want to make sure you're getting protein from these sources, as well as maybe supplementing with a whey protein, because it'll be very high in leucine. And protein doesn't just help muscles, it also supports our connective tissue. There's a lot of protein in connective tissue. So think tendons, ligaments, the things that hold us together. And if we don't have enough protein in our system, we're not going to be able to build those stronger in response to exercise. It also helps our joints and our nervous system to adapt as well. So we recommend 0.7 grams per pound of body weight per day minimum, up to a gram per pound of body weight per day.
And I would say a good baseline for most people is just like aim for, if you can't, measure that every day, like aim for 100 grams every day, like bare minimum, all adults, probably higher than that for most people. But if you can get at least 100 grams of protein per day, like you're going to be setting yourself up for success.
Yeah. And a lot of people struggle to get that much.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what we said earlier. Like most people are only getting more like 75. And again, probably not from super high quality protein sources.
So actually, I heard that something like 40% of adults over the age of 65 don't hit the RDA for protein. I read that in a study. 40% of adults over the age of 65 don't hit the RDA for protein. The RDA is very low. It's like 0.38 grams per pound of body weight, so less than half of what we're recommending. Yikes. And it's not even enough to... It's enough to survive, sure, but certainly not enough to build and maintain muscle, if that's what we're after, which we are. So for a 180-pound person, you need like 125 to 180 grams of protein per day. 200-pound person, 140 to 200 grams per day. Especially important post-workout and really all meals. You need 20 to 40 grams of high-quality protein at a time. So after a workout, Nicole and I will usually have a protein shake with creatine added in. So some milk, a scoop of Ballerina Farms protein powder, which is what we've been using lately, and a scoop of Momentous creatine. That's what we have right after the workout. The creatine timing doesn't really matter all that much. You can take it whenever you want. We'll touch on that later. But it helps us to make sure we're getting that in throughout the day. Now, when it comes to carbs, most people think that they need to eat carbs to replenish their bodies after exercise. And the reality is, unless your exercise is ultra intense, you probably don't need a whole lot of dietary carbohydrate to replenish yourself. Now, refueling glycogen stores. So glycogen is in our muscles and our liver and can get depleted with high intensity exercise. So refueling that doesn't take a whole lot of carb intake. Maybe a piece of fruit after a workout would be plenty sufficient. Over the course of an entire day, would recommend something like 0.5 to maybe 1 gram per pound of body weight of dietary carbohydrates. If you're trying to lose weight, it should probably be closer to 0.5. So the rule of thumb that we've used with our clients for a long time is 100 grams or less of carbohydrates per day. If your goal is weight loss, eat a lot of protein, like we talked about, keep your carbs under 100 grams a day, you'll probably be successful.
Yeah. And I would say that like the carbohydrates, you want them to be really high quality where you're going to get both, the micronutrients and the fiber, and it's not going to spike your blood sugar too much. So like if you have to choose between a banana and berries, like choose the berries.
Yeah.
And so, because a banana is going to be like half of your carbohydrates for the day. So don't do that. Don't waste all your carbs on a banana. Go for the fruits, like high quality fruits. Also root vegetables are good. Tubers.
Like potatoes.
Yes. Sweet potatoes are one of our favorite sources of carbohydrates. And then not having too many carbs at night also can really help with sleep quality.
Nice. And then fat is the third macronutrient, and our diet should be about 50% fat in terms of energy, total energy. And that's because fat provides a steady source of energy and fuel for our bodies. In fact, fat is the preferred fuel source for the human body. Even if you're relatively lean, you have enough fat in your system to energize you to walk from here to Northern California. Here being Southern California, that's where we are. Now, contrast that with carbohydrates. You only have enough carbs to give you about 600 or so calories worth of energy. After that, you start to try and pull fat from fuel and turn it into sugar for the bloodstream through a process, I believe, called beta oxidation, if I'm remembering correctly. But that process takes time, and that's why people often, when they endurance exercise at a high level, they start to bonk because they're low on blood sugar and low on energy. So dietary fat, though, is fantastic for providing steady energy all day long, and we recommend getting your fat from sources like, well-sourced meat, like beef, chicken, fish, other animal fats like tallow, lard, ghee, butter, avocados, olives, nuts, and omega-3 rich foods like fatty fish, sardines, etc. Now, make sure that you avoid industrial seed oils like canola, corn, cottonseed, soy, sunflower, safflower. These oils are very high in omega-6s. They're also very fragile, so during the processing, they often oxidize and become inflammatory. These have been linked with oxidative stress and impaired recovery, the exact opposite of what we're trying to do in our journey to become healthier, stronger versions of ourselves. So when it comes to protein, aim for over 100 grams per day. When it comes to carbs, aim for less than 100 grams per day. When it comes to fat, make sure about half of your daily calories come from fat.
So next we're getting into like more of our micronutrients. So we talked about our macronutrients, micronutrients. And I think that the best way to get the most micronutrients and is the easiest for most people is to get a high quality multivitamin. I think it really covers your bases for a lot of deficiencies or gaps that you might not be getting in your diet. You could do, the blood panel where you kind of see specifically like what you're deficient in. And if you want to go down that route with your, physician, do it. Like, I think it's great to do a deep dive. Most people aren't there. They're not going to spend the time getting, that expensive blood work. And so just taking a really high quality multivitamin is going to help get a lot of the micronutrients that you need.
Yeah. And most of the ideal form for the body to receive nutrients is whole food.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we want to make sure that our diet is rich with fruits and vegetables, with well-sourced animal products that are eating grass instead of grain, because the food that they're eating, the nutrients in the food is going to get transferred to us in terms of animal products. So we want to make sure that we're eating well, and that's where we're going to get most of our vitamins and minerals, and that's probably the preferred form for the body to
definitely.
get those.
Yeah.
However, due to the standard American diet, as well as just soil deficiency today, I do think it's a good idea to supplement with a multi. And both of us take a multivitamin today.
Yeah, so there's two that we have taken, Momentous and Thorn. And so Thorn you can just get, on Amazon. Momentous, I think we'll include the link for that. They're very similar. I think the difference between Momentous and Thorn is that it has higher phytonutrients.
Momentous does.
Yeah, Momentous.
Yep.
And you do have to take 4 instead of 2 pills. So if you have a hard time taking pills, maybe go with Thorn. The other thing that I would recommend is fish oil. Unless you're getting really high quality fish 2 to 3 times a week, which most people are not, then you should probably supplement with a high quality fish oil. So you want to be careful with fish oil that it's, if you're actually doing the fish oil, that it's in a dark glass bottle, and you want to make sure that it doesn't stay out in the heat, that you keep it in the fridge, because again, it starts to oxidize over time if it's, exposed to heat and light. And so that dark glass bottle helps to protect it from oxidizing. And that's really where a lot of the, benefits come from. So we don't want oxidation. We want those omega-3 bonds to stay intact. And this will help with, what do omega-3s do? It really helps to reduce muscle soreness and inflammation. And there's evidence that it improves recovery markers, and it also helps to reduce delayed onset muscle soreness.
Fluid is also a really important component of recovery, meaning water, hydration. Dehydration obviously impairs recovery, increases muscle soreness, slows down the process of glycogen resynthesis. When you train, you want to make sure that you're drinking water as you're training, so as you're working out. So I would say aim to drink a bottle of water, whatever that means for you, during your workout, and you're probably going to check your box for fluid. I typically will recommend at least 64 ounces a day of water. Drinking water can also help people reduce the amount of calories that they're eating, just in general.
Yeah, a lot of times people will be actually thirsty, but they'll eat instead because
Yeah.
they're dehydrated. And so I would say make sure you're drinking enough water. And then also if it's hot, like here today, it's extra hot. So we're drinking extra water because you're just going to lose more fluid through sweat naturally. And then in winter, you probably don't need quite as much water.
And if you struggle to get enough water, you may want to supplement with something like Element.
Yes, Element is our favorite. It has electrolytes in it, which is just sodium, potassium, magnesium, which again, people are often deficient in those things. And it can also help. So if you have, those trace minerals or those things, it can help with sweat loss. It can also help to support nerve conduction and muscle function. And this is especially important if you're doing like exercise outside, if you have high volume of exercise, if it's really hot. So almost every time we hike, especially in the summer, like we have Element when we're out hiking because we know that we're losing a lot of fluid. And then
specifically losing
electrolytes,
sodium, potassium, and magnesium in your sweat.
Yep, exactly.
And
those
are really important to keep balanced.
Exactly. And it's also really helpful for people who don't like water. Like I have told a lot of people about it and they've started taking it. They're like, well, I drink way more water instead of, other things that maybe aren't as good for them. So if it helps you drink water, add a packet of Element. You can also just do trace minerals, like the concentrate mineral drops. You can just add a couple in to your water. They are flavorless. Some people say it kind of has a little bit of a flavor. So sometimes I'll even add those into my Element packet in my water as well.
Dang, double dip.
Double dip.
Shoot. Creatine is another well-researched supplement for recovery. It improves strength. It reduces muscle damage markers. It speeds up recovery between sessions. I was checking out examine.com as we were prepping for this, which is a fantastic resource that compiles all these different research studies and gives summaries of the net effect of certain supplements like, say, creatine on certain outcomes like anaerobic capacity, skeletal muscle atrophy, injury rehab rate. And these are all the different things that creatine has an impact on. So injury rehab rate, it has a small improvement on injury rehab rates. DNA damage, it has a small decrease to DNA damage. Inflammation, didn't have an effect on that. Power output and muscular strength, very big improvements on those two things. Exercise-induced oxidation or inflammation, it had a moderate decrease in that. So lots of different unique effects from creatine that are very helpful when it comes to recovery, and it's such an inexpensive supplement. I would highly recommend adding that to your repertoire. We'll put the link for the Momentous brand of creatine that we recommend in the show notes.
And we would recommend for most people 5 grams a day is safe and it's effective long term. There is research that says you can take more for more of the mental benefits and cognitive benefits, but
I took 10 today.
You did?
That's why I'm so...
Dang.
Yeah.
That's
so
why
peppy.
you're so on point.
Yep, so peppy.
I just took my 5. Next up, we're going to get into collagen, and vitamin C is another one we'd recommend. That's not typically in just like a multivitamin. It helps to support tendon and ligament
recovery. We'll put both
recovery.
of those in the show notes too.
And there's evidence that 10 to 15 grams of collagen plus 50 milligrams of vitamin C an hour before training can actually help to improve connective tissue remodeling. So can help with that recovery process. And then another fun one is
so fun.
tart cherry juice. So we actually haven't experimented with this one, but there is some research about it. And so we thought we'd throw it in here. And again, it's because it's polyphenol rich. And so there's other foods that you can get it from. So it's not just tart cherry juice, but things like berries, artichokes, greens like spinach and kale and onions. And what do these foods do, or tart cherry juice do? It helps to reduce soreness and speed up recovery.
They reduce inflammation.
And inflammation because they help to reduce the oxidative stress.
We read a book called Genius Foods. Is that what it's called? Mm-hmm. And I think blueberries were one of the genius foods because of how high they are in antioxidants. And oxidation is the process by which we age and decay through this very specific cellular process called oxidation. It's why we get age spots on our face and wrinkles, why our arteries tend to develop issues, and why we get this like chronic inflammation over time. So oxidation is kind of at the root of all of it. And antioxidants help to combat that process. So age is very real and it's going to happen to all of us, but we can, in essence, slow the aging process by making sure that our body has what it needs to fight it off. And a great way to do that is to make sure the food you're eating has a lot of antioxidants. And foods like blueberries, raspberries,
Tart cherry juice.
tart cherry are very high in antioxidants.
We're definitely going to be trying that soon.
Yeah. Tell us about low-level movement. We were talking about that before the show.
Yeah, it's a really great way to recover between strength training workouts, especially like I tell people like they're like, what should I be doing on my days off? And I just say like move a lot. Also move on the day that you do strength training. It'll help decrease soreness. And just low level movement helps with a host of all sorts of things. It helps your joints. It helps so that you have more mental clarity throughout the day. Like, you know, if you've ever sat at a desk or sat for a long time listening to lectures or whatever it is, it's like your body's ability to focus in and concentrate really, you know, decreases the longer you're sitting. And so just getting up and moving, it doesn't have to be really fast or brisk or challenging. Can have a lot of benefits on your body. It also really helps with your blood sugar control. So there's a study done where they looked at people who did like an hour walk in the morning versus that same amount of walking spread throughout the day. And they had a lot better response in like their insulin was more sensitive to blood sugar changes. And so essentially move a lot throughout the day. So set timers to remind yourself to get up and move, get a walking pad. There's all sorts of things you can do. And I think you'll just feel better in general if you don't just sit down. Also, like so many people come to us with like chronic neck and shoulder issues and back issues. And you know why? Because they sit too much. And so stop sitting as much, start walking more. You'll feel better in general.
Okay. The final thing we want to cover are some of the fringe strategies for recovery. We get asked a ton of questions about these, and some of these things we actually do. Things like ice baths, sauna, foam rolling, stretching, etc. So first up, let's talk about cold exposure. So we actually have a cold plunge at our house.
I have a love-hate relationship with that thing.
Yeah, it's very cold. And the cold plunge is essentially a tub of cold water. So there's a chiller that circulates water in and out of it that cools the water and to keep it at a certain temperature. And there's a lot of research to show that cold water exposure is really good for our immune system. It's really good for reducing inflammation, etc. But does it actually help with recovery? Is, I think, the best question to be asking. Now, as far as reduction in muscle soreness in the short term, yes, it can indeed help with that. However, if you do cold exposure right after a strength training workout, it can actually blunt the muscle building effect or the muscle protein synthesis from that workout. So not a good idea. We don't cold plunge right after a strength training workout. In fact, we exercise in the mornings and then we'll cold plunge in the evenings right before we go to bed. So, 8-12 hours later, something like that. So that's where I would recommend it. It's like at the end of the day, if you are going to do it, and you can get a lot of the benefits of a full tub cold plunge just from taking a cold shower at the end of the day.
Yeah. Next one is heat. So this could be sauna. It could be hot water, like going in a hot tub, heat packs.
Nicole really wants a sauna.
I do. I'm hoping for that for maybe my birthday or Christmas present this year. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah. So this can be really good for relaxation, circulation, tissue elasticity. And when you are lifting heavy, you're not just stressing your muscles, you're also stressing the proteins that are inside of those muscles. So some of them can literally like get a little bit bent out of shape. And that's where heat shock proteins come in, and they act like little repair crews. So they help to rebuild the damaged protein, protecting cells, and they also help you to adapt so that you come back stronger. So strength training does boost our heat shock proteins, and so does heat. And so there can actually be a benefit when you go into a sauna right after training. Studies show that this can both speed up recovery, protect your muscle, and even improve glycogen replenishment. So if you don't have a sauna, maybe find a gym that has a sauna or a friend that has a sauna. Or, you can do heat packs, you can take a hot shower. But really the sauna will help with your body's ability to recover. And it's like, amplifying that recovery, post workout if you go into the sauna. So hopefully that'll be in our future recovery.
Yep. Cool. So foam rolling. Nicole loves her foam roll.
I do.
Every morning she foam rolls in red lights while she reads.
I do. Habit stacking.
So foam rolling is great for reducing muscle soreness. There's research that shows like a 20 to up to 40% decrease in muscle soreness.
Which is interesting because soreness is really like someone's perception of soreness. Yep. So cool. Someone could have the same amount, the same stimulus, and one person could be really sore. And again, that's based on a lot of different factors, but some people are more sensitive and might get more sore than others.
Who are you talking about?
Oh, I don't know. Our son,
Oh, okay.
he's been running a lot recently
Yeah.
for soccer. And so we've been doing a lot of cold plunging with him. And I think it's been helping.
Yeah. Well, maybe he needs to foam roll.
Yeah, maybe he does.
Foam rolling also great for improving flexibility and range of motion in the immediate time after foam rolling. And the reality is, though, it doesn't accelerate muscle strength or recovery in a meaningful way. So if your goal is to recover better, like foam rolling on your off days, yeah, it might help with some of the muscle soreness, but it's not going to help you to perform at a higher level the next day. Stretching. I get asked a lot about stretching. And one of people's biggest questions when they come in and do our program is, where is all the stretching? Why are we not stretching before? Why are we not stretching after? Stretching. And the reason is because it doesn't do anything. The research shows that stretching before a workout does nothing to prevent injury, nor does stretching after a workout. In fact, stretching before a workout can actually decrease your performance because it reduces the body's elastic stretch response. So, for example, in a squat, when you bounce out of the bottom of a squat, if you've stretched right before all those muscles, you're not going to get as much bounce. So you don't have the same amount of elastic spring in your muscles. So it doesn't help before, it doesn't help after. So we don't do it at Village. We don't really stretch a whole lot. I guess we do a little bit of gentle stretching at the end of a workout, but we certainly don't stretch before. We do what's called a dynamic warm-up, meaning we're actually moving our bodies. And the best warm-ups are those that get you physically warm. They elevate your nervous system a little bit, and they're as similar as possible to the workout that you're doing. So before a squat workout, you want to do squats to warm up. Before deadlifts, you want to do deadlifts to warm up. Anyways, that's all I have to say on that. I'm going to get off my soapbox here.
Great. So just like a hierarchy of muscle and injury, or recovery and injury prevention, would just be, the first thing is having the appropriate stress in your strength training and doing progressive overload. So again, we won't go into the details of that, but that would just be the first thing, is like making sure that you dial that in. And then the second thing would be your sleep. Sleep is, like we said, the cheapest, most effective form of recovery. Third would be your nutrition and really dialing that in. The fourth would just be kind of like Matt said, like the things that aren't as important, but could, show some like minimal improvements in recovery, which is cold and heat, foam rolling, and stretching. So hopefully what you've gotten out of this is that less can actually be more. And if you are resting more and not just, trying to put your body into too much stress, you actually might have more long-term strength gains. You'll probably have better energy for your workouts if you're not overdoing it or not getting enough sleep. You'll be less likely to get injured, and you'll be more consistent with it over time, because, that's really the key to long-term success is long-term consistency and adaptation. And if you just do this for little bouts, like you're never gonna be excited with the results. You're always gonna kind of be frustrated unless you find something that you can stick with long-term.
All right, let's finish up with our questions.
Great. So what does a perfect rest day look like to you?
Ooh, wow, perfect rest day.
I think you had one of these recently.
My birthday?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it started with a 6 a.m. bike ride. So I don't know if that qualifies technically as a rest day. So I'll just be honest. My days off from working out are usually because I don't have time to work out. I very rarely will intentionally take a day off from working out. I think my week is structured. My workout week is structured such that I'm recovering from my strength training when I'm doing my cardio training. And then usually because of life, there's 1 to 2 days every single week where I just don't work out, or I work out very little. So anyways, my perfect day, it starts with a breakfast with you.
Lovely.
Yeah. And then we go for a long hike, take a nap, and then have dinner.
Sounds great.
Yeah. That's my perfect day.
I love it. We just had that recently too.
Yeah. I would say so.
Yeah.
Okay. Question for you.
I put one in there for you.
I know you put one in there. I'm trying to come up with my own question. What is your favorite recovery tool?
Recently, red light therapy. which we didn't really get into, but that I have been using in the morning while I also foam roll.
Me and my friends who have wives who are very into red light therapy. I like red light therapy too. I'll just say
You do. You use it in the morning as well. And I have a face mask.
Dr. Justin and I were sending each other's pictures of our wives in their red light masks. And Justin posted on his Instagram something about an intruder in his house, which was just his wife with a red light mask. And I said, dude, the intruder in my house has the same mask.
Yeah, so I would say red light. Also cold plunging. Like, I feel incredible after I cold plunge.
It does make you feel good.
Oh my gosh, so much better. I hate it during, but after
But
I
I
feel so
love
much
it.
better. So
Yeah.
I cold plunged this morning after my little weighted walk, and I was like, wow, I feel so much better.
Nice.
So.
All right. Thanks for listening. If you are on Spotify, leave us a comment on this episode with questions that you want us to cover in future episodes. We'll do a frequently asked, or we'll do a question and answer episode coming up here in the coming months. And we want your questions. You can also email them to podcast@villagefpt.com. And we'd be happy to cover them on a future show. Like, subscribe, leave us a review. And until next time, I'm Dr. Matt.
And I'm Nicole Klingler.
Stay strong.